Hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
It's
Fantastic. Good to see you out here. Okay, so tonight we're having a video, DVD video presentation about God and science and how science and is faith and science compatible. You know, a lot of people today don't think it's very compatible. But this is a video made by Father Robert Spitzer. Father Robert Spitzer is a Jesuit priest, and he was born in Honolulu. That's where Brenda's going.
Look at that. Go see.
And he went, did all his schooling, high school finished in Honolulu. He's got degrees about the length of my arm, so I'm not going to go over them. He's got a Bachelor of Business Administration. He has a master's degree in philosophy, in divinity, master's degree. He's got a master's degree in theology, and he's got a doctorate in philosophy. He was the president, 25th president of Gonzaga University. He became a priest, took his vows, and was ordained priest in June of 1983. And this is what I don't understand, but he was ordained priest in 1983, and then he professed his vows to the society in 1994. So like there's an 11-year gap. I'm not too sure what happens there.
With Jesuits, there's more formation after you're ordained.
Okay.
Unless he became a diocesan priest and later joined the Jesuits.
Okay, that's why he's so smart. He's written numerous books about science and God, new proofs for the existence of God, contributions of contemporary physics and philosophy. He has books entitled, for example, Finding True Happiness, which is a really good book and a good series too on videotape. The Soul's Upward Yearning, that's one of his latest books. And he's appeared on several national TV programs, including the Larry King Show. Everybody familiar with that? Larry King Live? And he was on there with Stephen Hawking
Wow.
and Leonard Mlodinov and Deepak Chopra. So they had the four of them discussing, of course, atheism and the existence of God. So that was very good. If anybody wants to see it, it is on a YouTube video. He was on the Today Show discussing euthanasia, and PBS talking about Closer to the Light, discussing God and creation. So he's been everywhere. He's got a weekly, a nationwide television program on EWTN called Father Spitzer's Universe, and it's every week. I think it's Wednesday nights, but you can get them all on YouTube. They're fantastic. And and his website is called the Magis. It's the Magis Center of Faith and Reason, and it's www.magis MAGIS Center SENTER.com. So, without further ado, we're going to go right into the video, and then after the video, Deacon Gilles is going to come up here and moderate and help us discuss the topic tonight.
So a wonderful turn.
Hi. Our talk this evening was a presentation by Father Robert Spitzer, and hopefully at the bottom down on the screen you'll find a link to the talk that we just watched. So what I'd like to do now is open it up for any sharing or thoughts that you might have, just so all of you on YouTube land or in YouTube land know. Our brains are quite in pain right now because we've never heard so many polysyllabic words put together in one long string of the theory of how God began the universe, or the universe beginning, and multiverses. And I always thought multiverses was when you're quoting, a whole chapter of the Bible, so that's a multiverse to me. Anyway, but rather than asking me specific scientific, illogical questions, which I don't know the answer to, I'll just stare at you and blink rapidly. But perhaps we can share something of what we got from what we could get from what we heard today, what we found encouraging. I think the main, underneath the topic itself of what Father was talking about that universe or the multiverse or existence as we know it, the way he was sharing, has a beginning. It's also that the church is not opposed to science. Now, I will grant that in the course of history, there have been challenges and struggles in us moving along in that direction. I do think that that's true, although not all of the things that people say the church did for that reason was that. Doesn't mean that to go from, thinking the world is flat to discovering the world is round was an easy, chasm to jump. But if I could speak on behalf of the church today, now, in this century, in this era, the church is absolutely not opposed to science, works with it, and we know that truth is truth, and that God if God is the creator of everything, then everything that he creates leads back to him somehow, and that faith and science aren't opposed. Unlike other religious groups, Christian or otherwise, who might be strict literalists and see faith and science as opposed. Just like you'll have some groups that oppose technology or advances in medicine or anything like that. The church is not against that. We can have transfusions, we can have surgery, we can take advantage of the science, and to know, it's reassuring to me that there are very intelligent people who are members of the church who are also members of the scientific community. It's just they tend not to be promoted by our public information system known as the media. So, but aware of that, it reassures me that we can hold our own in this conversation with other scientists and other people of other thoughts and views, that we can hold our own in terms of bringing about this conversation about how did the universe begin, and we can speak polysyllabic, not me personally, but we can hold our own in terms of that. Aware of our own weaknesses and our own humanity, but certainly aware that the church is not opposed to scientific discovery. And many Catholics and many Christians are involved in every facet of science. Any other thoughts of what you might have got from the video? Let's hear it. Speak nice and loud so that YouTube people will hear you. Yeah.
As I mentioned immediately after during our break, for me, I think it's reassuring, but at the same time, I choose to believe that all of the discoveries in science and medicine, etc., everything about what we are discovering about the universe is God allowing man that intelligence. And it's amazing how it seems to be propelling at a faster rate than if we can think back at the time of the Industrial Revolution, for instance, if I dare even put that as a marker in time.
Yeah.
think the biggest danger for all of mankind is to not think himself as God just because we have this ability to do all these mathematical equations to prove or disprove the theories that are out there, etc. And it's absolutely mind-boggling for me, and at the same time, I'm in awe that there are people that are created that have these amazing gifts. But as long as we don't forget that it points all back to God, our Creator.
My high school physics teacher was a practicing Catholic, and he marveled at, and this was in a public school, he marveled at creation. And for him, there has to be a God for all of that for it to work and function and all that. He just marveled at it. And I think if we can approach science, it's certainly from that point of view of curiosity and the point of view of joy and the point of view of that. I think humanity as a whole is a lot like an individual, where, you know, when we're 2, we know what a 2-year-old knows. We can't know more than that, right? And then when we're 10, we know a little more. And when we're 16, we know everything. And then when we're 30, we know nothing again, you know. But as we grow, you know, well, some people more, as we grow, as we mature, our ability to know expands and grows. And I think as a people, as a humanity, you know, from discovering the wheel to discovering fire, you know, to discovering the latest thing, that's what we're doing. We're growing, right? And and also because there are more people now, there are more scientists, and there are more people studying, you know, more things. So that also helps with that expansion, because there's so many more people looking at all of that. So I think that's cool that we do develop and grow and deepen, that there are things that we have no idea about that people 100 years from now will know that we don't know now, you know, that we'll learn. And it's always interesting. Anybody else?
Just on the issue of time, when you read the Bible, Genesis, 6 days of creation, you're given a perspective. And then today's topic is 13.8 billion years from nothing to something. And in my mind, I always try to place, where is the 6 days of creation? Is it when it was nothing? Was it at the time 13.8 billion years ago? Or was it just in the last few thousand years? You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
where in
I
that
don't think you
spectrum?
can take, again, a literal thing. The whole thing is the story of God intentionally made us. I don't take any more out of that than that. I think that the main thing is that in the mind of God, He says, I choose to be created. It's often, they often contrast the story in the Bible, which is, they say, 2 stories kind of put together from different Jewish traditions and that, as opposed to one of the big pagan stories was that of the Gilgamesh epic, where we were just the product of a conflict between the different deities, and one had their guts split open, and that just created the universe of the earth or whatever, right? And so it tells you that the divine beings just created us accidentally, as opposed to the story in Genesis, which is telling us God deliberately created us. God wanted us to be. God called forth this world, this universe, and us as individuals. That's the story right there. I think to try to over-interpret that might step outside the intention of the story. Just like the same thing with the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is meant to tell us, you know what? You're going to go through trials and difficulties. Stay faithful to Jesus. But I don't worry about whether this event in that chapter of the book of Revelation relates exactly to that politician or that world leader. I don't do that myself. Other people might want to, but I don't see that as necessary. I see it as basically saying Christians will be persecuted, will go through trials, we follow the Lord, and I don't read more into it than that. The thing is, at the end of the book, the Lord wins. We will be persecuted. We've been, we've had times of persecution, up and down through the centuries, right? And so it's, how do I be faithful? So to read the Bible beyond what I think the authors would have meant those particular passages to mean, we might try to square around, like put a square peg in a round hole. We might be trying too hard to make something fit that it's not necessary. If we study the universe and see how matter was made and how light was made or how energy was made, it doesn't have to fit, to me anyway, a literal box like that. It's more fluid than that. But the theological idea underneath the creation story is, one, there's a God, okay, so believers say, okay, there's a God. Two, that God is a thinking being, a conscious being, and that God willed the universe, earth, and us to exist. That's a lot to chew on right there, to pray about that. That's the main purpose. More than that, well, I'll leave that to the experts. If they can do that, fine, but otherwise, I think it's okay. Like someone said, well, how can there be light if there's no stars? It's like, well, again, if I try to make the story fit all of that, it's like, who did Adam and Eve's kids marry? Who did they have kids with? If I overthink, then I start thinking about incest and all that kind of weird stuff, and I make the story say more than it's able to say, because it doesn't tell me everything. It just tells me God created humanity. Go from there. Right? I don't want to overread or underread. Anyway, yeah, that's at least what I know. Anyway, sorry I can't say it in big polysyllabic words. Anybody else?
There is resistance in some Christian circles to accept the theory of evolution, of how we change over time, how animals evolve and people evolve and all that sort of stuff. And that has caused a lot of friction in some circles, where the non-denominational churches don't want to send their kids to public school because they'll be taught evolution, and they don't see that as compatible with creation.
Right.
Yeah, and so how can we help that along, do you think?
I think part of it, it's a complicated thing, because I think sometimes the theory of evolution is presented in a purely atheistic, anti-religious bias too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can make people of faith upset, even those willing to accommodate evolution. So it's, and then you have like militant atheists and militant fundamentalists on both sides, picketing each other, and it's like, well, okay, that doesn't open itself to a kind of a dialogue here, and how do we do that? In a public school, they should respect the faith of all of their students, whether they're Muslim or Catholic or Baptist or whatever, that's fine. But you say, okay, your various traditions will tell you the theology behind what we're teaching you. We're not competent to tell you that, but we can tell you that there is a developmental process that happens in biology, right? Now, again, there may be, again, not being a scientist either way, a lot of people who are creationists will say, well, there are gaps in evolution that don't prove everything. And so that doesn't mean you have to be a pure creationist, but you have to say, well, how it all unfolded is a bit of a mystery, but for the believer and for the Catholic today can accept evolution, believing that God's hand has to be in it. And as far as our tradition teaches, there must be a beginning of humanity, and that at the beginning of that humanity was endowed with a living soul. with a rational soul. And so from that point on, there's a beginning of humanity. Aside from that, how the development happened and stuff like that, you see some developments with different different creatures, where you see, oh, well that they kind of adapted a little bit, or whatever. I'm not an expert on either side, but I think a Catholic can kind of walk and chew gum at the same time in this thing, you know, where we have a both and. We have a development and we have a creation, right? Because God made it. But again, I take the human being, or any animal, right? Begins as a little thing, right? Begins as a little thing, and it grows, right? And that's creation, right? It might have began with a few cells, and then it grows into many different variety of beings, right? And it's, if I was developed, I wouldn't pop out of my mom as a full adult, you know. I started little, and I grew from there, right? And so that development, and so the universe, again, the same thing, or living beings could have, you know, started out that way, but hopefully there is a providential guidance, just as there's a providence in my own life, as far as where I am in life and what I'm doing in life, and there's providence there, that there's a hand of God that works through the creation of grass and trees and flowers and bumblebees and everything else, right? That God's hand is working in all that, because you look at all the variety of creatures and you go, well, that's just amazing, you know? And you think, there's a creativity there, and it's hard to see it as random, for me anyway. It's
There's
hard
a
to see
group
it
in the
as-
States that created a theory that ran the center point. It's called the theory of intelligent design. So it's between evolution and
Yeah,
creationism.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the intelligence. So you have
Intelligent design.
intelligence, okay? So a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim say God, right? He's intelligent, and he goes, I make a dat, right? When I go to Rome and I see the Pieta, right? Well, the stone didn't make itself. Somehow it's carved, right? I said there's a mind behind that. So there's a mind that, you know, but the mind didn't make the mark, you know. It's like Michelangelo had to take that marble and create it out of something, right? And so it's like this marble didn't just make itself, right? It had to be made into that shape, right? And so you see an intelligence behind the beauty. So you look at the beauty of creation and you say, well, who painted this picture that we see in 3 dimensions? Really great Leonardo da Vinci, we call him God, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Just to go back a little ways that you were talking about, you know, the 7 day, what were you talking about?
Creation versus evolution?
Yeah, the evolution, yeah. Spitzer actually has a, Spitzer has a video on that. It's called the Remarkable Evidence of a Transcendent Soul. And the origins of man, like they can date back the origin of man to, we have a common mother and father. They can date back the genes anyway to one mother and one father, so everybody has this common ancestor. About 300,000 years ago. But then about 70,000 years ago, something happened that the human being just exploded in their language and in their thought and everything like that. And they claim that that's when God would have infused a soul into the human being, about 70,000 years. So if you want to know more about that, go to
Magicenter.com.
Yeah, so there's interesting science there, at least one possible way of explaining it.
yeah,
right?
because you know we think in terms of okay, well there was Adam and Eve, and then oh they had kids, and then the kids kind of you know had kids, and then well that's that. But according to the latest evidence, you know this is the latest theory, is that at one point it was just that God would have infused a soul, and then things started changing. And then he compares at that point, and then they compare, you know, like they have chimps today. You know, they do experiments with chimpanzees, and they can identify about 180 symbols. You know, like a banana, a tree, and they can identify these symbols. But if you say, you know, the dog bit the man, or the man bit the dog, they can't differentiate between that. But a 3-year-old can. And so why is it that a 3-year-old, you know, what happened in the evolution to change that perception?
Interesting.
Anyway, watch it and hopefully that'll give you some more ideas about that.
Should we end with prayer?
Yeah, I think we're good, right? Any other questions? No? In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, we want to thank you for this wonderful universe that you have made. We thank you, Lord, for making us, so that we may marvel at this creation of yours and enter into a relationship with you. Pray that you help us to retain what we possibly can retain from this presentation, at least knowing that that we can trust that you are there with us, and that you want us to exist, you call us to exist, and we are there to serve you, to love you, to know you. Help us, Lord, to go from this place assured of your love for us and of the grace that you give us to live our lives. We pray your blessing upon each of us in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.